Kwame Adeyemi is one of Africa's most powerful men, a self-made billionaire whose empire spans real estate, technology, and finance across 3 continents. For 5 years, he has employed Amara, a quiet Ghanaian woman from the streets of Accra, as his live-in nanny for his 2 young children. She is invisible to his world of board meetings and charity galas, existing only in the spaces between his ambition and his children's laughter. What began as duty has transformed into something neither expected. In the silence of early mornings, in stolen glances during family dinners, in the way Amara's voice steadies his daughter's nightmares, Kwame has fallen in love, but Amara remains unaware. Or so he believes. She is bound by gratitude, by fear of losing her salvation, by the weight of a past that taught her never to dream above her station. When a family crisis forces the truth into the open, both must confront what society forbids, that compassion recognizes no class, that love grows in unexpected gardens, and that sometimes the most powerful person is the one brave enough to kneel. This is a story about a man who built an empire, but found his soul in the eyes of a woman he was taught to overlook. That day began like any other, until one act of kindness changed everything. What started as a quiet encounter between 2 strangers became a story the whole city would remember. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we tell stories that prove compassion can rise from the most unexpected places. Chapter 1. The Invisible Woman. The penthouse overlooked Lagos like a throne room suspended between earth and sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlantic, where light bent across water in shades of amber and gold. Kwame Adeyemi stood at the glass with a phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp as broken glass. "I don't care about their conditions. We close the deal by Friday or we walk." His reflection in the window showed a man carved from ambition, sharp jaw, eyes that had learned to see weakness in every boardroom, shoulders that carried the weight of 3 countries' economies. He was 52 and had built his fortune on a simple principle: never show softness, never show uncertainty, never let anyone see the boy who once slept on Lagos streets. Behind him, the apartment was silent. His 2 children, Zainab and Kofi, were already fed, bathed, and sleeping. They barely saw their father anymore. The divorce had finalized 2 years ago. His ex-wife had married a Belgian diplomat and lived in Brussels now. The children stayed with Kwame because it was expected, because he was their father, because there was no one else to raise them, no one except Amara. She moved through the penthouse like a ghost who had learned to accept her invisibility. Her rooms were on the service floor, small, austere, overlooking the city's underbelly rather than its glittering crown. Kwame had never been to her rooms. He had never asked about her past. He paid her 3 times the market rate for nannies, mostly to ensure her silence, her discretion, her absolute reliability. Amara was the kind of woman people's eyes slid past. Dark skin worn thin by years of hunger, hair wrapped in cloth, hands that moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned that a single mistake could mean eviction. She wore the same 3 uniforms, spoke only when addressed, and moved through rooms as though she were part of the furniture. Kwame liked her precisely because she was invisible. But something had shifted 5 years ago, on the day she arrived. She had come recommended by an agency, one of dozens of applicants for a position most people would have rejected, raising another man's children in a home where love had evaporated. Zainab was 5 then, angry at the world. Kofi was 3, still searching for his mother in every woman's voice. Amara had knelt on the floor and simply been present. She had not forced smiles or false cheerfulness. She had sat with Zainab's rage and had held Kofi while he cried for a mother who called twice a month from Brussels. She had sung songs in Twi that made them remember something they had never known, a grandmother perhaps, or a dream of safety. Within months, the children bloomed. Within a year, Kwame had stopped noticing the exact moment she had become essential. By year 5, he had stopped trying to pretend he did not notice her at all. It had happened slowly, in ways he could not have articulated to anyone. A glance held 1 second too long as she passed him coffee. The way his chest tightened when she laughed with his children, a sound so rare and genuine that it broke something open inside him. The nights he sat in his study, supposedly working, actually listening for the sound of her footsteps in the hallway. She was 43. Though she looked older, the kind of old that comes not from years, but from surviving them. She wore no jewelry except a small wooden cross. She had no family, no visitors, no life beyond these walls. He had hired investigators without knowing why. They reported, born in Accra, orphaned at 14, worked in hotel kitchens, survived 2 years homeless, saved money for years before finding the agency that changed her life. She was free. She could have left. Instead, she stayed. Kwame told himself it was because she needed the money, because the children needed her, because the alternative, admitting what he felt, was impossible for a man like him. Tonight, as he stood at the window with the city blazing below him, he heard her voice in the hallway, singing Zainab to sleep, a lullaby in a language he did not speak but understood completely. It was the sound of a woman loving children that were not hers, as though they were. It was the sound of everything he had never learned to be. He closed his eyes and felt the shame rise like floodwater. He was a powerful man. She was his employee. What he felt was a betrayal of every principle he lived by. What he felt was the only honest thing left in his life. Chapter 2. The Weight of Seeing. Morning light leaked through the penthouse windows like a slow confession. Kwame had not slept. He had spent the night in his study, reviewing documents he did not need to review, making calls that could have waited, doing anything except acknowledging what his heart had become. By 6 in the morning, he heard her moving through the apartment. He always heard her first, the soft click of the service kitchen door, the whisper of her feet on tiles, the gentle clink of dishes as she prepared breakfast for the children. These sounds had become the rhythm his entire day orbited around. He opened his study door and watched her from the hallway. She did not know he was there. She was preparing Kofi's favorite, pancakes shaped like animals. Her hands moved with the unconscious grace of someone creating something for love rather than duty. She was humming that same lullaby, and there was something in her face, a softness, a momentary peace that made him understand suddenly and completely that he was stealing something from her, her privacy, her dignity, the right not to be watched, not to be wanted, not to be the object of a powerful man's secret hunger. She looked up, and their eyes met across the kitchen. Her hands froze on the mixing bowl. Something flickered across her face, not recognition exactly, but awareness. A moment where she sensed that something in the world had shifted. "Good morning, sir," she said quickly, returning her attention to the food. Amara. He had said her name thousands of times, but never like this, never with all the weight of 5 years compressed into 2 syllables. She did not turn around. "The children will be awake soon. Their uniforms are pressed. Kofi has his spelling test today. He studied for an hour yesterday." She was speaking in the professional voice she always used with him, but her shoulders were rigid. She knew something was wrong. "I need to ask you something." "Of course, sir." "Stop calling me that." The spoon stilled. When she turned to face him, her eyes were careful, trained to show nothing, to assume nothing, to expect nothing. "Kwame," she said, testing the sound of his name. She had never spoken it before. Always it was Sir or Mr. Adeyemi. Hearing his name in her voice was like hearing a prayer in a language he thought he had forgotten. "How long have you been happy here?" The question hung in the space between them like something dangerous. "I am grateful here," she said carefully. "The children are good. The work is honest. I am blessed." "That is not what I asked." Zainab's voice called from down the hallway. She was awake. Amara turned away, smoothing her expression into professional neutrality. "Excuse me, sir. I must attend to—" "Do you ever think about leaving?" She stopped. Her shoulders dropped slightly, as though the question had weight. "No," she said quietly. "I do not." "Why?" When she looked at him again, there was something in her eyes, a depth, a knowledge, a terrible kind of seeing. "Because this place is the first place that has ever felt like home," she said, "and I have learned that home is fragile. Home is something you do not question. You simply wake up grateful that it still exists." The words were gentle, but they landed like an indictment. She was speaking about the children. She was speaking about her room, her salary, her security. She was explaining why she would never leave, why she could never leave, why the idea of her leaving was a betrayal of the only safety she had ever known. She was not speaking about him. That was when Kwame understood the cruelty of his own heart. Chapter 3. Cracks in the foundation. The weeks that followed were a careful choreography of distance and proximity. Kwame began eating breakfast with the children again, something he had not done in 3 years. He attended school pickups, helped with homework, and slowly transformed himself into the kind of father his children barely recognized. But the real change was this. He began seeing Amara. He noticed the way she moved differently when she knew he was watching, more careful, less alive. He caught himself studying her hands, her voice, the small scar above her left eyebrow that she never explained. He found excuses to be in the same room, to hear her speak, to exist in the space she occupied, and he began to understand the architecture of her restraint. There was a night when Zainab had a fever. It was 3 in the morning, and Kwame found Amara sitting beside his daughter's bed, her hand on the child's forehead, whispering prayers in Twi. She did not start when she saw him. She simply moved aside, as though his presence was expected, as though this vigil was something they shared without ever having spoken about it. "She will be fine," Amara said. "Children are strong." He sat on the edge of the bed. "You should rest." "I will rest when she is well." That was when he saw it. The love in her face was not the professional affection of an employee. It was something deeper, something that came from the marrow. She loved these children the way a mother loves, without condition, without reservation, without the armor that everyone else wore in his presence. And he understood, in that moment, what he had been too blind to see before, that she had given his children the one thing he could not, an unhurried, unconditional presence. She had taught them that they were worth staying for, that love was not an exchange, but a gift. She had given them what he had never learned to give. By morning, Zainab's fever had broken. Amara had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, her head tilted at an angle that would surely bring her pain when she woke. Kwame found a blanket and draped it across her shoulders with a care that felt almost sacred. That afternoon, he did something he had never done before. He called her into his study and closed the door. She stood near the exit, as though prepared for dismissal. "Is something wrong with the children?" "No, they are fine. I wanted to talk to you. Not as an employer, as someone who has something to say." Her body language shifted into complete stillness. "Of course. Amara, I have been thinking about your position here, your salary, your future. Is my work unsatisfactory?" "No, your work is extraordinary. That is precisely why I wanted to discuss your advancement." He had rehearsed this carefully. A promotion, an expanded role, a path to something beyond Nanny, perhaps a position in his household management company, with education funding, with opportunity. It was a box wrapped in ambition, designed to contain his own need without burdening her with it. She listened without expression. "You would like me to do something different," she said finally. "I would like you to have choices. You have given so much to my family. I want to invest in your future." She turned toward the window, toward the city sprawled below them. "The future I have is here," she said quietly. "In this apartment, with your children. If I accept another position, I must leave them. Is that what you want?" "No, I do not want that." "Then the offer is kind, but I must refuse." She turned back to face him, and in her eyes he saw something that made his breath catch. There was grief there, and resignation, and something else, something that looked almost like knowledge. Comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories of hope and redemption can travel. Chapter 4. The Storm. The crisis came on a Tuesday, unexpected and absolute. Kwame's ex-wife called from Brussels. Their divorce agreement had stipulated that his ex-wife could petition for full custody if Kwame's living situation became compromising to the children's welfare. Carmela had found a new leverage point. A gossip column in a Lagos lifestyle magazine had run a photograph of Kwame and Amara at a grocery store with a crude caption about relationships that cross social boundaries. It was nothing scandalous. It was a man and a woman buying groceries, but scandal, Kwame knew, required only the suggestion of impropriety. "The children will be better off with me," Carmela's voice came through the phone, sharp and certain. "She clearly has romantic designs on you. This is the environment you want to raise them in, with a woman who—" Kwame hung up, but the threat had landed. His lawyers sent emails within hours. His board members began making cautious inquiries. The story, small as it was, had a momentum now. In certain circles it was being repeated. The billionaire and the nanny, the inevitable scandal, the children's future compromised by their father's poor judgment. That evening he called Amara into his study again. But this time he was not offering solutions. He was preparing for a sacrifice. "I need you to know that there is a situation," he began, "a misunderstanding that has created some complications." She had already guessed. He could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the chair. "My ex-wife is threatening custody litigation. She believes that your presence in this home is inappropriate, that it creates an environment unsuitable for the children." Amara's face went very still. "I see." The photography was innocent, a chance encounter, but perception is often more powerful than truth. "You are asking me to leave," she said, "not a question. I am telling you that if you do not, my ex-wife will take the children to Brussels. She will file in court. She will claim that I am unfit, and she will likely win." The silence stretched like a wound opening. "What do you want me to do?" Amara asked. It was the wrong question. The right question would have been, "What do you want? What do you feel? Do you love me?" But Amara had spent her entire life asking what others needed from her, never what she needed from the world. "I want you to decide," Kwame said, and the words cost him everything. "If you want to leave, I will help you find a position in another home. I will give you a reference, savings, whatever you need to start again. If you want to stay, I will fight. I will hire the best lawyers. I will go to court and defend your character. But the children might still be taken from me." She sat down slowly, as though her legs could no longer hold her weight. "If I leave, you lose me," she said. "If I stay, you lose them. There is no choice here, Kwame. There is only loss." It was the first time she had used his name without him asking her to. And hearing it, spoken with such clarity, such pain, made him understand the true architecture of his selfishness. He had built a beautiful cage and called it a home. He had loved her in silence for 5 years because speaking that love aloud would have demanded something of her, a choice between her survival and her dignity. "I cannot do this to you," she said finally. I cannot be the reason your children are taken away. Amara, I will leave. Give me 2 weeks to find another position. I will do it quietly. No one will know it was my choice. That is not what I want. I know, she said, and there were tears in her eyes now, but it is what love requires. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. The 2 weeks were a slow catastrophe. Amara continued her work with the children, but something fundamental had shifted. She was already gone. Her presence was a farewell, written in every gesture, every meal prepared, every night of staying up with sick children, as though it might be the last. Kwame could not bear it. He stopped going to his offices. He stopped answering calls from his board. He moved through the penthouse like a ghost, watching the life he was about to lose. And he began writing, late at night by hand, in notebooks he would never send, what he had spent 5 years too afraid to say. I see you. Amara, I have always seen you. When you sing to Zainab, when you help Kofi with his lessons, when you move through this apartment like you are trying not to disturb anyone, I see you. I see the strength in your quietness, the dignity in your refusal to demand anything from anyone. I see the woman who taught me that love is not a transaction, not an achievement, not something to be conquered. I see the woman who makes me want to be better than I have ever been. I am sorry that I saw you, only after it was too late to speak the truth aloud. On the 10th day, Zainab discovered the notebooks. She was 9 years old enough to read, old enough to understand that something was breaking in the world. She brought the notebooks to Amara in the kitchen, where Amara was preparing their lunch. What is this? Zainab asked. Amara's hands froze. She read the first page, then the second. She sank into a chair as though her legs could no longer hold her. Where did you find this? In Father's study. He left it on his desk. Amara, these are about you. Everything in Amara's face crumbled. When she looked up at Zainab, there were tears streaming down her cheeks. Where is your father now? In his study. Amara, what is happening? Why are you leaving? But Amara was already moving. She walked through the apartment with the notebooks in her trembling hands, and when she found Kwame, she did not speak. She simply placed them on his desk and waited. He looked at the notebooks, then at her face, then back at the pages covered in his own handwriting. He saw himself through her eyes for perhaps the first time. A powerful man who had spent 5 years too afraid to be vulnerable, who had chosen safety over truth, who had asked her to bear the weight of his silence. I did not mean for you to see these, he said quietly. I know. That is why I believe them. She sat across from him, and there was no distance between them now. The careful employer-employee dynamic had shattered. There was only 2 people, sitting in a room, finally seeing each other. Tell me the truth, Amara said. Not the careful words you have rehearsed, the truth. I love you, Kwame said. I have loved you for 5 years. I love you because you taught my children what love means. I love you because you asked nothing from me except to be present. I love you because you are the most dignified, the most courageous, the most honest person I have ever known. And I have spent every day trying not to love you because I was afraid of what it would cost. Amara's breath came in small, careful increments. Do you understand what you are saying? I have nothing. I am nothing. I'm a woman without a family, without education, without any of the things a man like you should want. You are everything, Kwame said. You are the only real thing in my entire life. Chapter 6. The Threshold. That night, Kwame made phone calls that rewrote everything. He called his lawyers, he called his ex-wife, he called his board, and then his competitors. He made decisions that cost him politically, financially, and socially. He did these things not as a calculation, but as a consequence of finally choosing love over survival. To his ex-wife, he said simply, I will not be changing my living situation. If you wish to take me to court, you are welcome to, but I will fight with everything I have, and I will make sure that when the trial is over, the world knows exactly what kind of mother chooses custody litigation as leverage for her children's well-being. The threat was enough. Carmela settled quickly. The children would remain with Kwame, but so would Amara. To his board, he announced a restructuring that would give him significant time away from operations. He promoted his second-in-command and stepped back from day-to-day management. It would cost him tens of millions in foregone opportunities. He did not calculate whether it was worth it. The morning after these decisions were made, Amara knocked on his study door. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what you said, about love." Kwame could not speak. "I have been afraid," Amara continued, "my entire life, afraid of wanting anything, because wanting has always meant losing. When I came to this house, I built walls. I told myself that I would only stay temporarily, that I would never let anyone matter too much, that I would accept gratitude as a substitute for belonging." She paused, gathering strength. "But you have loved me anyway, even when I was invisible. Even when I was afraid, even when I did not know how to receive it." "Amara, I do not know how to do this," she said. "I do not know how to be loved by someone like you. I do not know how to be anything except what I have always been. But I want to learn." Kwame stood and crossed the distance between them. "You do not need to learn anything," he said. "You only need to choose to stay. And if this story already touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps Amara's message reach more people who still believe in kindness. Chapter 7. The beginning. The wedding was small, almost private. Only the children, a few close friends, and a priest in a chapel overlooking the Lagos harbour. Amara wore a dress of white cloth woven in Accra by women from her childhood neighbourhood. It was not the dress of a bride, but rather the dress of a woman who had chosen herself. Kwame watched her walk toward him, and he saw something in her face that he had never seen before. Not resignation, not gratitude, not the careful composure of someone serving others. He saw joy, pure, terrified, miraculous joy. When they spoke their vows, Amara's voice was steady. She had learned to speak her truth. She had learned to say, "I choose you, I choose this. I choose to believe that love is possible for someone like me." Zainab and Kofi stood beside them, witnessing their father finally learn what their nanny had tried to teach him all along, that love is not something you conquer or achieve. It is something you simply open yourself to receive. That evening, at a small reception in their home, Kwame's ex-wife called to speak with the children. He expected coldness, perhaps retaliation. Instead, he heard her voice soften as Kofi described the wedding. "She made my favorite cake," Kofi said. "And she looked so beautiful. I have never seen Amara smile like that." There was a long pause. Then Carmela said something Kwame had not expected. "I am happy for you, all of you." Later that night, as the celebration quieted, Amara stood at the penthouse windows, looking out over the city. Kwame joined her, and they stood in silence. "I used to dream, when I was homeless," Amara said quietly, "that one day I would live in a place where I could watch the sunset from above the clouds. I thought it was an impossible dream, but I learned that impossible dreams are the only ones worth having." "You are not dreaming anymore," Kwame said. "No," she agreed, "but I am still terrified that I will wake up." He took her hand. "Then we will make sure you never have to wake alone again." Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 3 months into their marriage, Kwame's past caught up with him. His business partners had been quietly preparing a hostile takeover of his company. They had been waiting for him to be distracted, vulnerable, to slip. And when he stepped back from his operations to spend time with his family, they saw their opening. But something unexpected happened. The announcement of his marriage to Amara had resonated through Lagos's social networks in ways his lawyers had not anticipated. Journalists began investigating his background. The man who had risen from the streets, the man who had built his empire while never forgetting where he came from. They discovered the truth, that before Kwame was a billionaire, he had been a boy sleeping on those same streets where Amara had nearly died, that his entire life had been built on the belief that he had to become someone powerful enough that no one could ever dismiss him again. The story shifted overnight. Instead of a scandal, it became a narrative of redemption. Self-made billionaire marries woman from the streets, a love story of second chances. The headlines read, "African CEO proves that true wealth is found in compassion, not capital." His business partners, faced with public support for him and the revelation of their own attempts at betrayal, abandoned their takeover. His shareholders actually increased their stakes, moved by the authenticity of a man who had finally stopped performing success and started living it. But more importantly, something shifted in Kwame himself. He finally understood that the armor he had worn all his life, the power, the wealth, the careful distance, had been built to protect a wounded child who believed that love required conquest. He had taught himself that tenderness was weakness, that vulnerability was risk, that the only safe love was one you controlled. Amara had undone all of this, not through her words, but through her presence. She had shown him that the most powerful person in the room is not the one who fears being hurt. It is the one brave enough to be broken and still choose love. Chapter 9. The Redemption. 1 year after their marriage, Kwame and Amara opened a foundation together. It was not a charitable organization in the traditional sense. There were no galas, no photo opportunities, no tax benefits displayed prominently. Instead, it was a network of homes, education programs, and employment initiatives designed for people like Amara had been invisible, forgotten, assumed to be beyond saving. They called it the Second Chance House. The first location was in the neighborhood where Amara had nearly died, where she had slept on streets and worked in kitchens just to survive. There, they provided not just shelter, but dignity, job training, education, counseling, and most importantly, time, the time for people to remember who they were beneath their circumstances. Kwame was there on opening day, but he was not the center of attention. Amara was. She spoke to the residents, 40 women and children who had nowhere else to go, with a voice that carried the weight of her own survival. "I was like you," she said. "I was told that I was nothing, that my poverty was a reflection of my worth, that I should accept survival as enough and never dream of more. But I was wrong to believe those lies, and you should not believe them either. You are not the circumstances that brought you here. You are the strength that allowed you to survive them, and this house is a place to remember that." There was not a dry eye in the room. That evening, Kwame and Amara returned to their penthouse with Zainab and Kofi. The children had accompanied them to the foundation opening, had seen their parents work together to restore dignity to people society had discarded. "Father," Kofi said, looking out at the city from their windows, "Amara taught me something today." "What did she teach you?" "She taught me that being powerful does not mean making other people small. It means helping them become big enough to be seen." Kwame looked at his wife, at the woman who had transformed everything by simply refusing to accept invisibility, and understood that his son had learned the most important lesson of all. Epilogue. 5 years later, Kwame would occasionally walk through the penthouse at night and find Amara on the balcony, watching the city sleep. He would join her in silence, and she would take his hand. On these nights, she would sometimes speak about her dreams, the ones she had thought impossible, the ones she had learned to hope for again. and he would realize that the greatest privilege of his life was not the wealth he had accumulated or the power he had wielded. It was this, the chance to love a woman who had taught him that redemption is not something you achieve through conquest. It is something you receive through humility. The world had forgotten Amara when she was homeless and desperate, but Kwame had seen her, not as a vessel for his own rescue, but as a teacher showing him that true strength is found not in building empires, but in recognizing the dignity in every person society has abandoned. And in that recognition, he had finally come home. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, courage, and second chances. Thank you for watching. African powerful man fell for his poor nanny after 5 years in secret, emotional discovery. And remember, one act of kindness can rewrite a destiny.